Well, Wish sure has been taking a beating since, well, its announcement really. While I found the premature Wish doomerism unnecessary, I admit I wasn't that excited about it either. But just earlier this year, that was pretty much the case with Elemental. No one was particularly excited about that either, but it ended up being one of the more enjoyable and recovered better than most in Box Office Apocalypse Summer. And somewhat appropriate for its 10th anniversary, I also wasn't too excited about Frozen either, before or after I saw it. So I don't always have great perception in terms of what is and isn't going to be a hit with people. However, at this point, I doubt that Wish is going to make the same comeback. While I may not be fuming, I am fairly sour and exasperated by it, because just being underwhelming for a Disney musical would be one thing. But what grates me is how much Wish's creative decisions are defended with, "It's a celebration of 100 years of Disney, and that's why we have all these throwbacks to classic Disney." But these sentiments ring deafeningly hollow, which is pretty well embodied by the animation, which does look a little better than it did in the trailer, but it is fairly unimpressive in comparison to everyone else who jumped on the hybrid model a lot sooner and with a lot more unique vision and 2D inspiration. Because they can talk all they want about trying to make it look like that old Disney storybook look, but this is just their usual CGI era designs with cell shading and painted backgrounds. It's definitely not that the animation is bad, it's frequently very pretty. It's just not as impressive this late in the game, especially when people heard this was originally going to be 2D. Then Asha, as our protagonist, is also an oversimplified embodiment of the CGI era leads. I have been a grumbler over the whole modern vernacular in a fantasy setting DreamWorks inspiration since Tangled started it, along with the very bubbly, slightly awkward personality that would come to define this decade. But that isn't as much of a problem as the forced humor that usually accompanies it, with overuses of phrases like, "Wait, what?" and "Really?" But at least when it came to Rapunzel and Anna, they had reasons for acting the way they did. They had been locked up for most of their lives, and that's after we've established very tragic personal circumstances. But Asha, for all of her goofy faces and hyperventilating, has no reason to act with this exaggerated level of goofiness, aside from this very one-day situation about being nervous for an interview. And Asha will almost instantly stop channeling New York special Marinette when she's confronted with the film's conflict and becomes adequately coordinated and even tempered for the rest of the film. And in the end, there just isn't very much to say about Asha other than she's well performed and she cares about people. A bare minimum but functional protagonist. So really what this is Disney, like a lot of family films, just front loads their film with comedy, and they've completely forgotten any other way to do that than by having their female lead stammer for 5 minutes. Oh yeah, and as much as I love Alan Tudyk, do you guys remember Life before Frozen premiered, and everyone thought we were gonna hate Olaf, only for most people, including me, to be surprised by how much we liked him? Olaf wasn't actually in Frozen very much, as in he didn't really take up that much screen time. He doesn't appear until the first third is already over. But more importantly, he is thematically connected to the story as he represents the bond between the two sisters. There is a reason why he's here. But Valentino, he's definitely not the only talking animal, and other talking animals are way more helpful than he is. And he's not even the only tag-along comic relief, to the point where you forget that Valentino's even there and his only job in any scene is just to say something completely unfunny and break the mood and potentially get Asha caught 500 times. But of course what people really want to know is Magnifico a return to great Disney villains? Well, he is the most entertaining thing in this film, and yes, he is a deliciously hammy villain. Some people don't care for Magnifico's song because it's too upbeat, but I do get it. I also miss Classic-era sinister villain songs, but I also am not really surprised. The CGI era for everyone has been defined by staying upbeat, bright, and silly. Villains can be evil, but they haven't been able to be scary. And yet DreamWorks has still managed to pull one out every once in a while. Disney is just super out of practice. Could have used one of those great classic throwbacks. But while it doesn't reach the same level of iconic as its predecessors, I do appreciate the sheer arrogance and irony of the idea of, "I'm so unappreciated in this city where my face is on literally everything." And the elevation to complete villain may have been a bit abrupt, but they did lay decent groundwork, even in his kind moments with an undercurrent of disdain and conceitedness. At All Costs sounds like a loving lullaby, but the meaning shifts when you realize he's basically singing to his personal collectibles. This guy didn't consider art or animation a talent. That's how you knew he was a bastard. However, what keeps him from being in the top echelon of classic Disney villains, aside from the fact that his design is still just kind of an ordinary human, they almost do too good of a job at the start making him seem reasonable and genuine in his intention, even giving him a tinge of a sympathetic backstory. I just think how much cleaner his evil persona would be if we just got rid of all of the allusions to a tragic backstory, and I think the only reason that they're there is to explain why his wife is still so attached to him. And then I wonder, did she really need to be in this movie? A disappointing impression indeed, since in an early concept she was also supposed to be evil. And speaking of more characters that didn't need to be here, so after the really appealing introduction of 6 random characters bursting into a room and screaming right after this happens, you notice that one of them's got allergies and another one's drowsy, and the color coordination is vaguely familiar. It's the 7 Dwarfs. Okay, why? Why would bloating your cast to 7 extra characters whose plot contributions could have been done with maybe 2 make the plot better somehow? But what's particularly irksome about this to me is if there was any chance of this working, why is this group of people moving like they're joined at the hip so we can never get a proper look at any one of them, and makes it so that most of them never get speaking roles because Grumpy always has to be sassy? Like, did you think if they weren't constantly in a group that the audience wouldn't get it? Like, imagine if they broke this group up and had them appear individually throughout the movie, maybe as people that Asha helps, who then in turn at the end help her. At that point you see all their gimmicks come together and it clicks. That's almost like setup and payoff. And yes, this film is overbursting with references and Easter eggs to other Disney films, part of its celebratory factor. Most of it is just background stuff, and that's fine, because that doesn't affect the story in any significant way. You want to have heaps of Renaissance-style Disney bounding? That's fine. But there's also at least half a dozen lines that are only there to be direct callbacks to something. I mean, I don't hate the idea of using this film as an origin story for several Disney tropes. It just feels so surface level. If their main purpose here was to tap into that nostalgia, well then why didn't they just go full in on that? Why create one giant crossover where characters from multiple movies, from multiple decades, from multiple mediums all interact together? Perhaps even at the Walt Disney Studio. What a vastly superior idea that would make this completely irrelevant. But I will shine a light on a theory that one of my patrons suggested in how the characters and plot collectively are celebratory, but still genuine question on whether that makes it worth it. Alright, finally, let's talk about the songs. No, this is not one of Disney's best soundtracks. But the lyrics? Ha ha ha! Such a potentially infinite amount of problems. Mostly the lyrics are just overly broad, repetitive, or otherwise just poorly thought out or sloppily handled, with more than a few instances of freeform pentameter, erratic syllabic pacing. It's too many words! You were forcing too many words into a line and it throws off the rhythm. First there'll be this line, and then in the second line they'll try to fit in as many words as possible. In some cases, that's an entire verse. Does anyone else hear the first verse of This Wish and it gives them a headache? And given the one-note subject matter of a lot of these songs, boy, this is a lot of words to say nothing. And I'm a Star itself is exhausting. Half of the lyrics of this song basically translate to, oh just wait, in about 3 verses we're gonna say something that's gonna blow your mind. Are you ready? You're a star! Look, the line, we are all our own origin story is nice, you didn't need 2 verses to build up to it. Also, because of the way it's written, like it's supposed to be a self-contained pop song without seemingly thinking about how this was going to be integrated into the movie's story, the transition into this song is probably my least favorite moment in the entire thing. Oh my god, the cringe factor is so bad. Most of the problem is that this just feels second-rate and repetitive. And yes, I do put that on that the songwriters for this film were mostly experienced in pop songs rather than musical theater. One of those mediums uses its song to progress narrative and character, while the other prioritizes one-off songs, often about a singular vague sentiment like, ooh, wishes, ooh, stars, ooh, rebellion, and then repeat minor variants of the same sentences for 3 minutes. And Magnifico's song is the closest to providing actual character insight, but even then, the lyric work is still pretty sloppy. But do not try to catch me with Phil Collins. Yes, the songs were standalone, but they were also background songs, which meant that the visuals could keep the story moving forward. In Wish, the characters have to sing them, so if the song doesn't have much substance, that's 2 sensory mediums we're wasting time on. Also, the Tarzan soundtrack is fire. What nostalgia bias? I like the dramatic beat in knowing what we know now. It really does get your blood pumping and like you're ready to go into battle. I just wish I could erase all of the lyrics and make that song about literally any other conflict. Somebody completely rewrite this and make this about One Piece or something. I am not saying that the songwriters are untalented. I am saying that I am baffled that the higher-ups hired people with virtually no experience in this kind of musical storytelling for a company whose reputation was arguably built on the backs of musical storytelling. Did you at least try to call the Hadestown people? I am too frustrated that this movie was supposedly trying to do 5 other things, including possibly using the finale to literally set the stage for a live show, before just letting this be its own film. That is made incredibly plain when you look at the credits of this film, and it is all images of past Disney films with nothing from this one. But I will throw in that I do at least like the idea of how this movie views wishes, not as a thing where you just wish upon a star and it solves all your problems, but rather an essential part of your being, of your soul, emphasizing why Mephisto is such a bastard. There is definitely a threshold where as long as the animation and the songs are decent, that the film will find its audience. But I am going to make a suggestion. You ever hear of Under the Boardwalk? Oh yeah, I'm going there. Otherwise known as the New Jersey Hermit Crab musical? You remember the Paramount president last year that said that they weren't even going to bother with original animation? This is what he was talking about, because this was originally slated to come out in theaters last year, and then they just didn't, and they just dumped it on VOD last month after being in only 50 theaters for 2 weeks, which was only 1 week after they dropped the trailer for the first time. I'm not saying I would have been the first one to sign up for the Hermit Crab musical in theaters. I mean, I understand the struggle, we all saw what happened to Ruby. But you can see from the animation quality that there was real effort put into this, and it is actually a pretty decent musical. And if I am going to compare these two directly by their first 10 minutes, Under the Boardwalk is objectively better, because Wish is weighed down by the unfunny Asha quirkiness, and while Welcome to Rosa, it is probably the blandest song. But Welcome to New Jersey is a perfect musical intro song. It establishes its concept of the land crabs as locals and sea crabs as tourists. It's a beat, it's funny. Also, fam, himbo theme.
The heart is a muscle, it's the strongest one I got.
I think this is my favorite moment in both movies.
'Cause I'm more than a beathead.
And yes, I know, there's an obvious grading curve of expectations at play here. No one expects anything from the Hermit Crab musical, but Wish is being compared to some of the greatest animated films of all time. Not helped that it keeps making a lot of those comparisons itself. No, it is definitely not a masterpiece, but it was literally just dumped and nobody knows about it, and I think that's not fair. But of course, the way expectations work, now I have oversold the Hermit Crab musical, where now you'll all hate it and call me crazy, and the critical desolation of Wish will now lower expectations that people might actually enjoy it. Yes, there are things to like about it, just not a lot of things that I like about it.
You've got to dream a little harder. When life won't go your way, simply dream a little harder. Trust me when I say that when you dream a little harder, you're sure to follow through. 'Cause if you're good and you're attractive, no need to be proactive.
Good things will just happen to you.